Glad you're with us. In our lead today, reason, rhetoric, and the race to stir up enthusiasm. With primary season finally wrapping up and the run to November 2nd really on, Tea Party rallies, originally billed as all about remembrance and September 11th, actually mostly looked forward this September 12th to the midterms and stirring up a crowd. Meanwhile, the president's at it too, talking up jobs, and the job congressional Democrats have done this far. And he made his case not only in a televised press conference this weekend, but on African American radio's Tom Joyner's morning show too. Will any of the reasoning penetrate the general state of discouragement? Nation contributor, Princeton professor Melissa Harris Lacewell joins me next.
Let's start with the president's speech in Ohio today. What a humdinger it was.
I think he got his voice back.
Speaking with passion and empathy.
This was definitely the best speech we've gotten from him since he's been in the White House.
Of course, praise to be expected from the liberal counterweight.
But as you know, one speech does not change the narrative.
But that there's a gap between what the president says and does, that's a huge risk for him.
What are you doing? Do you know nothing of your obligation to shape the news towards your desired electoral goal? There is no but in journalism. Have you learned nothing from Fox? You pick your narrative and you stick with it. And if the news doesn't fit your narrative, change your news.
Melissa, so glad to have you back. So, have the commentators learned nothing from Fox? Stick with your narrative. How are Democrats doing?
Well, I mean, I think it in part depends on sort of what folks are up to. It is true that when you look at the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in the 2008 elections, one of the big chasms between them was the level of education. So in other words, it was all the college educated and even overly grad school educated folks who were in the Obama column. Now the problem with that is the main thing that college and grad school teaches you to do is to be really critical, right? The main role of it is to teach you to look at any particular event and say this, but also that.
All those buts that Jon Stewart's talking about.
All those buts. So it's kind of, you actually watch liberal commentators and you see exactly that sort of penchant for, on the one hand saying, yes, cheerleading the party, but then on the other hand, always wanting to remain the critical voice that is somehow above partisan politics.
All right, so it's your turn to be the overly educated person. What was your take on Obama's campaigning? It really was campaigning this weekend, both in that White House briefing, but also on Tom Joyner's show, where he preceded the briefing by going straight to, well, Tom Joyner said, welcome home.
Yeah, I got to say, I love Barack Obama on Tom Joyner. I followed the southern part of the Obama campaign a lot in 2008, and a lot of it did rely on black radio, urban radio, youth radio. So it was nice to see him moving back there. And you also see that President Obama is very comfortable campaigning. He likes campaigning maybe even more than he likes governing, at least in terms of how he presents himself. I thought the speeches were exactly what they needed to be. They are the kind of overarching narratives or the big stories about what Americans generally are facing, trying to tamp down on the notion that there's division between us, sort of all of us are suffering, all of us are trying to move forward. And at the same time, of course, trying to identify some real villains on the other side, particularly, of course, Boehner as the villain against whom, this whole midterm election should be focused.
Well, Boehner comes up next as the right lays out its narrative. Take a look at this compilation.
The Tea Party folks, Republicans, independents, and for that matter, there are a lot of Democrats that I've talked to over the last several months who are going to show up and vote for Republicans this time. This is a rebellion like I've never seen.
But I do think the leadership has got to, learn very quickly to work with them. John Boehner, as the next speaker, will do that, and I think Mitch McConnell and John Kyle will do it in the Senate.
These are independent-minded people. They really have no particular appreciation for the performance of either party in the past several years. They want to run for office in order to change that. For the most part, they've understood that our path to a position in Washington is through the Republican Party.
So just in case anybody out there didn't get it, I mean, every poll shows the Tea Party supporters are overwhelmingly Republican voters. But this story coming from the right now is these are independents. This is a revolution.
Yeah, there's never a revolution in a midterm election. And even when the results, as they were, for example, in '94, felt revolutionary with, the Republicans really taking back the House, midterm elections are not independent voters. Midterm elections are not folks who are independent-minded. Midterm elections are parties. And typically they are the out party trying to aggressively take back seats that it's lost in a presidential election year. That's just kind of how it goes. So this notion that this is somehow an unprecedented rebellion is, I must say, empirically false. So far, even if we see a loss of seats in the House, which we should expect, that's just sort of normal historical trend. And even if there's a takeover in the Senate, that's also normal historical trend. It's a pretty narrow margin there. It goes back and forth pretty easily.
And let's talk for a minute about those Tea Partiers. Here from Reason TV is a glimpse of what happened in Washington on September 12th. Maybe the out party, but also some far out talk. Take a look.
I'm not a racist, but I'm tired of hearing the Miss Black America contest. You can't get in if you're white. Tired of hearing about the black colleges. I'm tired of hearing black.
Must unite! Must unite!
Why'd you come out today?
Well, we came out to show all good people, Latin, black, and white, must unite, because this is like war. It's a class war in actuality. The Democrats are trying to show that the Tea Party people are racist. They're using the Truman trick. They're making them out to be Dixiecrats.
Just in case you were confused there, that's all at the same demonstration. And according to the reports from all over the country that I've read anyway, the rallies that did take place this Sunday were more focused on trying to counter this notion that there's somehow racism in the ranks of the Tea Partiers than there was much talk about jobs. For all that second guy said they're mostly concerned about the class war.
Yeah, that's fascinating, that clip. I could just spend all day with that. The notion that Miss Black America is somehow a policy issue, or historically black colleges, for example, which have higher percentages of white students and higher percentages of white faculty than predominantly white institutions. I mean, there's
makes every state beauty contest exclusionary too, of course.
Yeah, there's it feels like a massive amount of misinformation that if only we could just tell people the truth, then people would see differently. But that's not how American politics works. My bet is that both of those reactions, both from the African American man and from the white woman there, are kind of deep emotional reactions that are connected to people's sense that they'd hoped that everything would get better and get better right away.
Is it connected, and you've written about this recently in The Nation, to actual organizing, to actual work? Does all this kind of emotional talk translate into actual shoe leather working?
Yeah, I mean, it is still true that when you need to win a congressional election, that what you should be doing is knocking on doors, making phone calls, having events, meeting with constituents. I mean, it is just too easy to sort of sit back and look at national trends and say, this is how it will turn out. My bet is that if we go race by race by race, that the close races are going to be decided by who was out there and met the most people.
One Nation working together is a demonstration that's been called for October 2nd. We're going to be there covering it live. Does that kind of mobilization encourage you? Will you be there?
I won't be there, but only because I'll be with a bunch of other progressives on the cruise for The Nation magazine. But I'm not sure that national marches quite encourage me. I mean, I think it's fine to see them, but again, I'm a big fan of the work that is happening on the ground, and only the national marches, to the extent that what they do is make you feel like you're part of a movement that makes that on-the-ground work seem meaningful.
Well, I hope that the discussion about One Nation will continue. MSNBC's getting on board with this one.
Yeah.
Encourage you, discourage you?
Yeah, I think it's a fine thing. I mean, I think we, as we go back all the way back to that Daily Show, we need to be covering the left as much as we cover with anxiety the right. Part of what's happened on the left is a sense that we're not doing anything. Let's cover it so we know that we are.
All right. Melissa Harris Lacewell, I know that you'll keep doing that for The Nation magazine and Grit TV. Thanks for coming in.
Absolutely.
Well, coming up on Grit TV.